Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Myndful Podcast Show with myself and my good host, friend, Alex Osenenko. Obviously, we are going through a different time right now, and because of that, we have a special edition of our show based on the coronavirus epidemic, emergency, pandemic, everything you want to call it. Basically, this whole thing lumped in, and we're trying to get the best of the best on our show to be able to talk to them at all levels, whether it's a resident level, whether it's investor level, from an entity selection and tax level. Just we're trying to bring the best of the best and really get an understanding of what we're looking at. So our guest today, Clint Coons from the Anderson Law Firm, and Clint and I just did a webinar about 2-3 weeks ago, and maybe it felt like 2 or 3 weeks ago. I'm not even sure. Maybe it was last week, really. But
could have been.
yeah. So Clint, obviously things have changed, since then in the world. First of all, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm sure this is a busy time for you in all aspects of life. How are you doing and holding up, first and foremost?
No, I'm doing great. Yeah, like you said, it's been busier now than it was in January. I'm surprised.
Yeah. It's very interesting how the buildup of the unknown makes people start to get kind of start moving around. It reminds me like popcorn, when it's popping in the microwave and all of a sudden it pops, and you start seeing other people doing things, and you're like, maybe I should be doing things too. I see other people doing stuff, so I should start popping. So tell us from your perspective. You're in Washington, correct?
Correct.
What are you seeing in the Washington area, and how is that affecting in what you do? And maybe you can let people know what it is you do and your specialty, and then we can kind of expand from there.
Sure. So our firm focuses on asset protection, tax planning, business planning for real estate investors. And that's really how we've made a name for ourselves in this space, because we look at all three aspects of it. We have attorneys, CPAs in-house, and we help people understand that there's more to investing than just putting together a limited liability company or just focusing on taxes, that you got to be able to borrow money as well to grow your portfolio. And in order to do that, your plan can either help you or hurt you. And a lot of people don't understand those nuances in it. When they're walking into a lender and they're getting denied for a loan, or they're having to spend, 90 days to get that loan because they need to keep going back and asking for extensions because the underwriter doesn't like what they see on their tax return. So we help real estate investors navigate all that and put together a plan that helps them grow their business. And that's really our specialty.
So the way I would explain it to someone like me, if we were to dumb it down, you guys basically create the framework for a successful business model. Because in my mind, what you do is not the fast, sexy, flashy, but it's what holds the whole house up. And if you don't build the house correctly with the right frame, it will implode. And some of that is the right structure. And, I've always heard the term, it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. Mm-hmm. And I would imagine that holds very true into what you do and what you profess and teach to people. Is that a safe assumption?
It is, because there's so much misinformation out there. I'll give you an example. Just this morning, we made a proposal to an individual in California to create this structure with some LLCs to protect his properties. And he wrote back, he said, well, I'm talking to someone else, a different firm, who told me to create a Nevis limited liability company and just put friendly liens on the properties. It'll save me a lot of money. If somebody sues me, I have this Nevis LLC set up that's going to do X, Y, and Z. And I said, well, that's all fine and good. You could do that. But if you never loan the money, you never have a secured interest. And he kind of argued with me about it. I said, well, think on this. Let's say you went to the bank and you take out a $500,000 equity line of credit and you never use it. So are you to tell me when you sell your property, the bank gets $500,000? And was just dead silence, because it started computing then. I said, it's the same thing. It's unless you loan the money, the lien has no teeth. And I said, besides that, this property is in U.S. soil. You think they're going to give 2 cents about what some guy in Nevis is telling them about their interest in a property that's in U.S. territory? It's not going to happen. And so this is a problem that a lot of people have with understanding how these components work to create a plan. And until they're involved in a lawsuit, they're not going to know how good their plan really is. And we've had our clients go through some pretty nasty lawsuits with huge judgments entered against them in the 7 figures, and they've walked away without having to pay. So it does work.
It's very interesting you say that, because I think the tax and law and everything that surrounds entity selection and structure for asset protection is a very it's an unknown thing for people, and I think a lot of people like to do the put the head in the sand and just hope that someone else can either they'll be passed over and no one will notice them, or they give their money or they give their subject to someone else and say, please just take care of this for me. I don't even know or want to know. And I don't think either of those are the right approaches. I think educating yourself, which is what you do so well at doing, I think is vital when it comes to protecting what you own, and getting the wrong information and being ill-advised. You got to be very careful, especially in this day and age with real estate and such a litigious industry. You're talking sometimes everything that you own is wrapped up in a piece of an asset or property or business. And again, I go back to that framing of the house. If it is not framed correctly, and I think a lot of, we'll call it stress tests, are going to be done on a lot of houses and entities over the next probably 6-12 months with this coronavirus. Some people are going to realize that the path or builder that they chose to help them build their entity selection maybe didn't know what they were doing or didn't have their best interest. What would you say are some things that are going on that, right now, from the tax basis of the coronavirus and everything going on? What are some things that you're thinking, okay, these are coming down the pipeline, or, right as we know it today, right? Everything could change, but as we know it today.
Well, from an asset, so you want to know about tax planning, correct?
I'm talking kind of the whole thing. I guess let me rephrase that. Would we rather have this conversation split up into two, the tax planning and asset structure? Would that be a better way to tackle this for people to understand it?
Well, all right. So I think this is what they need to understand right now. It's really where we've put a lot of focus in on our practice, my partner and I, this last week. In fact, I had about 4 days of growth. I looked just like you 2 days ago, because I basically locked myself into my office and was just pouring through the CARES Act, that recent stimulus package that was handed down this past weekend.
Yep.
And trying to understand it, get my head around it from A to Z. And inside of there were a number of provisions that are extremely helpful and beneficial to individuals that they're just not yet fully understanding. It's something we're trying to educate our clients on, and put webinars to let them know what's available for them. So you ask, what would I be focused on, or what are my clients focused on right now? Well, taking advantage of this, because there's a ton of money that's been allocated, $2 trillion. And if you're not up on it and you're not getting part of that, or being a part of that, you're going to miss out on an opportunity. And so many people miss out on these opportunities because at this point in time, what happens is that you get so caught up in the negativity of the news, right? Everything's doom and gloom. And then you look at your business and it's struggling right now because people aren't working. And so you fall into this trap, this depression, I would say, that clouds your ability to think. And rather than me focusing on your business and finding ways to strategize to come out of this and be on top and to hit it as soon as you're available to, you retreat inside. And so then you're going to miss out. And I'll give you an example of that. So here's a baker, and he's in Seattle, and my son's girlfriend works for him. And he's been struggling. He has 3 bakeries because of the shutdown in Seattle. 2 of them are not performing. He's really down to 1 that's performing. He's cut off about 85% of his staff, and he's trying to just keep this thing alive to the best of his ability. And so as he's suffering through this, he's not showing up to the office as much anymore, she's telling me. There are programs right now that he could take advantage of that would alleviate all of these concerns. And what am I referring to? He could take advantage of the 3P loan program now, which allows him to gross up whatever his salary is on an average monthly basis through the covered period, which was last year. So let's say his salary for his bakery was $30,000 a month. Well, the government will give him 2.5 times that. So all you have to do is
payroll, right, Clint? Not salary, payroll, right?
Payroll,
for the company. Yeah, I just applied for my company, so I'm very intimately familiar with it.
Perfect. Thank you for the correction. Yeah, so you're going to get 2.5 times your total payroll costs for that covered period. And then you can take that and you can pay your salary, you can pay the salaries of your employees. And as long as you use it for that and your rent, because he has these 3 locations, he uses it for his utilities and his employee benefits, all that's going to be forgiven after an 8-week period. So that's free money to him. He has an EIDL loan that he can apply for and get a grant for $10K out of that. That's completely free. And see, people don't get this. I was just talking to my wife's cousin's husband. He runs this business, and we were discussing last night about the EIDL loan. He went through the application on his own. He had an opportunity to get $10,000 and he just chose not to apply for it. And I looked at him and said, why wouldn't you do that? He said, well, I didn't know if that was, it doesn't apply to me. It's like, the hell applies to everyone. You just missed out on $10,000 in free grant money. And so it comes down to education. People don't understand that there's lifelines now that have been given to you. And if you're not out there working with someone who understands them and trying to help you get this money, it's going to go to someone else. I tell people, just get in line, because there's only so much of that. 17 billion on the grant, 349 billion on the triple P. And the terms on that are phenomenal. You know, so if you don't use it, I mean, you got a loan on a triple P that's going to pay out, that you have 10 years to pay it back, 4% interest. You don't even have to start paying until next year. On the EIDL loans, 3.75% interest on a 30-year loan that you don't have to start paying until next year. So the money's there. The government has allocated it. And if you're not working with somebody who understands this, then you're going to miss out. And when you come out of the backside, you're going to be struggling. It's going to be more difficult for you to
Clint, where would people go and apply? I have an answer in mind as well, because we just did that. But where would people go and apply for the triple P? Because right now, as well as the other loan that will help investors, what do you term the other loan? What's the name of that program?
EIDL. So the triple P is a 7A loan. And so if you're going to go for the 7A loan, you have to work with a specific 7A lender. And you can go and you can ask your lender if they're a 7A lender and they qualify. So what's different between these two is with the EIDL, that's coming straight from the government. With the 7A loan, which is the triple P, what's happening is the lenders are loaning you the money, and then they're turning around and going to the government to get their money back. And so the government set aside, I think, $15, $16 billion just to pay these lenders, because they get 5% of whatever they loan on top of that. All that's built into the CARES Act. So it just gives you an idea how much reading I was doing. So you got to find a 7A. But the thing is that, you know, that doesn't start until this week. Fridays, when supposed to be the start date for the triple P for businesses, sole proprietors. You're not going to be able to apply until the 10th.
But people can apply and fill out the application. I don't think they can file it yet.
So they have the application, the preliminary application that has been released. It was released on Wednesday. Whether or not that is the final application they're going to use, I'm telling my clients. So we're doing this for a lot of our clients. We're still kind of holding off on that, because what they did with the EIDL in the last 2 weeks, they've changed that 3 times on us.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know. And so I'm not trying to get ahead of the game and submit this until I know this is the final app that we're going to use, because they could change it tomorrow.
That's some good advice. We did it anyway, just because our lender said, was confident enough to say, look, let's do it. It's not that big of a deal. Like, the application is only 2-3 pages. And if people worry about this, don't. It's like, it's really, you put some initials that, hey, your business is being impacted by Corona, but whose isn't?
Correct.
You know, whose isn't? And some hard to hit businesses, you know, and as long as you said, Clint, as long as this money is being spent on payroll and rent and a few other operational expenses that qualify, like, it's free money. It's not even a loan. Like, it will be forgiven, right? So it's like you have 2 months to re-instrument your business to serve the current economy or for the future. So like, when do we ever have a break in our business for 2 months where you can gather, you can't fire anybody, because if you fire, it won't be forgiven. But when we can gather everybody around the table and have 60 days to come up with a new way to do business or a new way to adapt to this, that's unprecedented.
What's even more unprecedented is that there's no personal guarantees, no collateral that has to be given. Even on the EIDL side, it used to be $25,000 cap, no collateral, no personal guarantees. Now they've bumped that up to $200,000 that you can get without that. So even if you didn't use it for all those things, now you've got this low interest rate loan that you can use to help grow your business, you know, this summer, and find other opportunities for you. And that's where I see a lot of people are missing out on this, is that I look at this time as an opportunity, because things are going to fundamentally change. There's no doubt about it. I mean, in our business, we teach a lot of educational events where we go out to people, we put on live events. That's going to be difficult to fire that back up. So it's using information like this, Zoom meetings, where you're reaching out to your clients and then changing the way we interact and then adapting your business to that, finding ways to reach out and market to people. And if you're not up on that and focusing on that and trying to retool, I think you're going to have a hard time after all these stay-at-home orders are lifted, because people are still going to be scared. If you listen to the news, like I told my wife the other day, I said, just turn that stuff off, because she's sending me these stupid texts about, well, I heard this, I heard that. And I said, I don't care what the outliers say. It's all about numbers. And I said, you're getting so absorbed into this, it's paralyzing you. And so I think a lot of people fall into that trap, and it's going to be very difficult for them to thaw themselves out.
One thing I want to say, I think it's very important. Something you said that I think bears kind of making a little bit of a deviation here. My Boeing, up where you live in Washington, being trained by Boeing for the last 25 years as an airline pilot, they teach us how to deal with an emergency. Okay, so when they talk about an emergency, it's going 600 miles an hour with 300 people on an airplane over the ocean and having an engine catch on fire. That is an emergency.
Why?
Think of what is going on right now.
You've got all that water around you to put it out. I don't understand.
Yes, you do have a lot of water around you, but you're at 40,000 feet.
Oh.
But when you put that in the same perspective of this being an emergency, I would say probably not as catastrophic to the people on the airplane as, having a tenant not paying their rent. And one of the things that they teach us when an emergency happens, and this is ingrained in our heads, is that whenever there is an emergency, the first thing you do, and I keep saying this over and over again to people, is you stop and take a break, and you take a breath, and you assess the situation. Now, this is a plane on fire. They tell you, stop, take a breath, assess what's going on. That's number one. Number two, they teach us that you have to fly the airplane. And what they mean by that is somebody in your business has to take leadership and has to take control of the situation and start delegating tasks and duties to people. So if you own a business, someone's got to be the leader, not the manager, because there's a difference between management and leadership. Somebody has to be the leader, and they've got to take control. The third thing, which is where everybody seems to go right to and stay on, is the problem. You identify the problem. Now, the problem, as we all know it, it's like hitting a bump in the road. It's in our rear view mirror now. We've hit the bump. It's in our rear view, but people still drive their car staring in the rear view mirror at the problem, as opposed to looking out the windshield and going, what's the solution to my specific problem? Not what the news is saying, not things that are not even relevant to me in Italy and in China and all these other things, if my business is not affected by those things. And lastly, it's to over communicate with everybody involved so that everybody knows what you're doing. If you take those principles, in my opinion, and you apply those to any business in an emergency, I think a lot more things would be productive coming out of this. And it's like, look, is that even our problem? Is the fact that, a chicken plant in Kentucky is shut down, does that actually affect me? Well, if I'm not in Kentucky and my residents don't get paid or whatever the case, if the baker doesn't have that problem, it's not even relevant to me. So why am I even, I gotta reduce the noise and push that aside. And I think that's the problem a lot of people have, is they're so busy focused in that rear view mirror at the problem, nobody's going to a solution of looking out the windshield. And I think that's something that nobody trains them to do.
There's at least one person. There's at least one person, Steve. Our previous guest, Jay Scott. I mean, this guy is definitely paying attention to numbers. And I think when you and I grow up, well, me personally, I want to be like him.
Yeah.
Clint is also looking, right?
Well, yeah.
I mean, from an investment standpoint, there's going to be a ton of deals.
There's going to be tons of deals availability. Now, whether or not you're in a position whether or not you're educated enough to see the deal, whether or not, Alex, before you hopped on, we were talking about, the entity selection for people in this time frame is so critical, because this will truly, in my opinion, will be a stress test on whether or not their asset protection for their business, their real estate, their families, whether or not it's actually basically was constructed correctly. And like what Clint does with the asset protection, with tax planning, it's not the most sexy, it's not the most fun. People don't hang around at parties and talk about what they're doing, but it's actually what keeps the house sustainable to survive when these big winds come through. Is the framework going to stay? And to me, that's exactly what he does. It's the invisible force field that keeps your empire running,
Well, as Jay pointed out, and Clint, I'll open the floor to you just a second. But like as Jay pointed out, this is going to be one of the best opportunities of our lifetime in terms for those folks who want to start or buy a business. A lot of people will be going under. A lot of people just, as Jay said, and I'm very well aware of this, who were operating already at sort of the limit of what this business, like it was just not quite shutting down time, but it wasn't quite doing so well. And they were just too tired of it, or whatever the case is, not energized to improve. Mm-hmm. Those businesses will be at a discount. And I think this is where the entity comes in. Like when you do buy the business or start a new business during this pandemic, I think you'll be attracted to do something quickly. But Clint, you shouldn't, right? Tell us how you should think about that right now.
So what I would say is that you need to put yourself in a position, so you plan, so that when an opportunity presents itself, you're ready to take action. And this is something I've always lived by, because that's how I've grown my business to over 200 employees. When I came out of law school, I started planning to build a business around a certain type of model that I practice right now, which is to go out, teach educational seminars to people, workshops, and then generate my clients through those by educating them. And I'd build out all the basic infrastructure. And people would ask me, my father would always say, why are you spending so much time doing this? You need to be out doing this and that and bringing people in. I was like, no. I've got my business plan in place and I know it's going to work out. And then when an opportunity came along, there was myself and then another group that was bidding for this opportunity. And I got it. And the reason why I got it is because I'd already had everything that they needed. I was able to implement the next day. I could start for them and do what they needed to do. And that's what you should have set up right now in this environment. You've got a breath right now. The government's helping you. They're paying you to, I'm not going to say not to work, but they're giving you the support that you need right now. And if you're not capitalizing on it and taking those steps to plan, to put the foundation in place, so when this turns, you can take action, you're going to miss out on it. 2008, 2009 should be a guide for you. In 2010, I started investing and I went full bore into that. And I made a ton of money. I've built up wealth, that is, in real estate by being able to buy deals back then when they were really, really low. And so it may not go as low as then, of course, after we come out of this, because it's a different dynamic now, but there are opportunities. I just closed on a couple of properties, my partner and I, where in January, the seller, he was very firm on the what he wanted for it and the terms. I'm like, no, I want my terms. He's like, no, I'm not going to do that. Mm-hmm. So 2 weeks ago, called me back up, said, hey, are you guys still interested? And I was like, yeah, we're still interested. And he goes, well, I really want this. And I said, hey, your price is fine, but here's the deal. Your price, my terms. He's like, okay, I'll take your terms. And so I just closed actually yesterday on a 18-unit property that I never thought I was going to get into those terms because of the way we were negotiating in January. So you got to be ready. So here's something you should be looking at right now. Last week, when we did a webinar on this topic, we talked about retirement plans. So those of you that have IRAs, that money's tied up there. I made a recommendation: set up a solo 401k, roll your IRAs. You can't do this with Roth. Roll your IRAs into the solo 401k, and then you would have the ability, if you see a property, to buy it in the name of your solo 401k or JV with it. We didn't cover that, but you could joint venture with it. And so now you've got funds. The whole point is this: now you have money, so when the deal comes along, you can take action. But here's something that changed. So from doing that webinar to today, they came out with the CARES Act legislation. And in that legislation, they threw us some great little Christmas presents for people that have retirement plan money. So now I can take an individual, let's say Alex and Steve, well, that's not a good example. Say, Alex, you and your wife, you've got two IRAs. Each of you have $200,000 in them. I could set up a solo 401k for you. We could roll both of your IRAs into the solo 401k, and I'll do two things. One, I could issue each of you a $100,000 loan out of your account. Okay, that's repayable over 5 years. So now you can get 100 grand. It used to be the most you could get is 50 grand or 50% of your vested balance. Now they've changed the laws. They let you pull out 100 grand or 100% of your vested balance. So the other benefit you can do now is you can pull out a distribution, tax-free distribution of up to $100,000. And you have 3 years to repay it. It's treated as a perpetual 60-day rollover for the next 3 years. So you have access now for if you had $200,000 in an IRA, I can get you access to all of that money. So if I was in a position to do that, I would set up my solo 401k. And we're doing this a lot for our clients right now, giving them a position now where they can get those funds so that when they find the real estate deals, they're able to take advantage of it and put that money. Or if you talked about doing a business, Alex, I've got you now in a situation where we could possibly use those funds to buy a business. If you saw a business or a business opportunity you wanted to go into, we could use those funds to fund your business completely tax-free. And the only reason that works is because you've taken steps now, you've planned, and you've laid it out. And the way I explained to guys, I said, listen, you don't have to do this. Stay where you're doing. But when that opportunity comes along and you're thinking, how do I do this? Clint, I need to get this set up right now. I'm going to tell you this. That's going to take me 4 to 6 weeks. And I can't help you in the time frame that you need because you should have done this 7 weeks ago when I told you to do it. But because you delayed, now you've lost the opportunity.
Clint, real quick on those loans, from what I remember, and I'm not sure if these are the same types of loans, but you could charge an interest rate against yourself on the loan that you're paying back the loan with interest, but that's going back into your to your IRA. Is that correct? Can you still do that? Is that?
Well, okay. So you mentioned that, I think, with the implication possibly that you're moving more money into your account. You have to use a commercially reasonable loan. Typically, what we put in our loan docs is 4% right now is what we're using. You can't deduct the interest you're paying back into your plan, but you're right. You are paying yourself back. So you're loaning yourself money out of your plan, then you're paying that money back into your plan.
Got it. Okay. Understood. I'd like to
go for
it. You mentioned the CARES Act, and I'd like to talk just touch on the stimulus package that's going on. Mm-hmm. And first, I've got 2 questions. Do you think this will be the only one, or do you think there'll be more? And do you think this is going to help, or is this just kind of a drop in the bucket of what is needed to really help?
Gosh, would there be more? Probably. They'll probably do something more on the side of transportation and to rebuild the infrastructure. I think there's going to be an infrastructure spending bill that will eventually come out of this. But then you got to look at, the pain for it. So this is something that, like the unemployment, for example, the federal government gives everyone, you're going to get federal unemployment of $600 a week. Okay, for 12 weeks, which amounts to 12.
Plus whatever your state gives you.
Yeah, plus whatever your state gives you. So my daughter, she works, she was attending University of Arizona. Now she's back. She's at home. She lost her job while she was down there. She qualifies. And so the question then came up within our family, do you apply? Because yes, she qualifies for it, but do we really need it? And so that's one of the things that I think that, from I don't know if it's moral or economic, you just have to look at and wonder, what is the right way to go with this for the economy in general? Because it is a debt that we're taking on, and somebody's going to have to pay it off eventually. I see the benefit, though, of it, and what's behind it is that you got to keep the businesses rolling. That if employees are there, they're being paid, and employers are using this money the right way to retool their businesses, I think it's going to soften the downturn. The slight downturn will probably come from this. But if they don't use the money the right way and they just blow it and they don't look at this as an opportunity to retool their business, then I think you're going to have problems.
Well, even blowing, Clint, some subset, I bet, will try to game the system, as always.
Absolutely.
Most people will probably do it right thing because, their employees are They're a lot of times very close to them, and it's just the nature of a lot of business owners take care of their people, especially in this unprecedented times. But even if they blow it, man, it's consumer spending. Like, this is something we're not having right now.
Yeah.
We need to do some consumer spending.
Yeah, but then that comes back as a loan, right? So that they owe the federal government. Whether or not they're going to repay that loan is anybody's question. So I know you have to look at it. It gets into the economy, but then it's a loan which is not unsecured by the federal government, or it's an unsecured loan to you. So I don't know. To me, it's a tough one. Because I look at
there's no easy answers. That's for sure.
There isn't.
Yeah. What advice would you give to people right now that are, whether they're a small business or they're an investor, because obviously we're dealing more with the single family investor, what advice would you give them on, tax side and entity selection? Because obviously they push back when taxes are due. Doesn't mean that you still don't do proper planning and procedures, because this is a marathon in taxes. This isn't a sprint or a April 14th, I better do my taxes conversation. What advice would you give to people that are really wanting to know how to handle this?
Well, one of the things that concerns me a lot, and I don't know if they're going to do anything at the state level or the federal level, is the potential for liability for real estate investors, because there's too many friggin' attorneys out there. And attorneys can take misery and turn it into profit for themselves. And they have no shame about doing it. So you take what's going on with COVID, and I think there will be lawsuits that will come out of this against real estate owners. So you single family owners, or say multifamily, for example. They'll say it's a sick building, that COVID spread through that building because you didn't use proper procedures to disinfect the common areas, and now 3 people died. So we're going to bring a wrongful death action against you as a result of it. And your insurance will not cover you on that. That's just the tip of the iceberg. You could say the property manager you sent into your single family rental to fix the sink that was clogged up for your tenant. He didn't know it, but he was positive. He passed it on to your elderly tenant. She passes away. Boom, you're sued now for that. And these are things that, only takes an attorney to figure out how to make money on. And unless the government does something to stop that, you better have your assets protected, because they're going to come after you potentially on this. And if anything that's left in your own name that's exposed and you haven't put your assets into entities, then it's going to be hanging out there. And the other issue that you saw after 2008, and this is something that people don't look at. Everybody can focus and understand the attorney. And that's where so many asset protection, so-called specialists, focus on is the tenant that's hurt and sues. But the other side is the banks. So here you are, you have a mortgage, your tenant, like I've already received the letters from some of my tenants. I'm not paying you for 3 months. Okay, what do? All right, I still have a mortgage. I can't evict them in some instances because the courts are shut down. They won't even hear those cases, or they're getting misinformation from governors who are saying, oh, you don't have to pay your rent. Well, where does that come from? That's not a law just because the governor tells you that. And people think, I don't have to pay rent because the governor said so. So I'm still liable on that. But if those property values go down in value, your rents are not coming in, how are you going to pay your mortgage unless you're getting deferment from your lender? But if the lender refuses to do it, it's not a Freddie or Fannie loan, and they give you some assistance there, now you're faced with this crisis. Property is worth less than what I owe. I can't get a tenant in there that's going to cover my mortgage. Do I walk away? Which a lot of people did in 2009 and 2010. But they signed a personal guarantee. And so those individuals we worked with who had structured themselves properly, they had their assets, their savings, their brokerage accounts held inside of a limited liability company, they didn't pay. But I saw way too many people that didn't follow that advice. Everything was in their own name, and they got wiped out. And so this is the thing that I've been impressing upon people. You need to reevaluate yourself, look at where your assets, how they're being held, and for the whatever you can do to get the assets out of your name, you should take steps to do that now as a preventative measure. Because once it happens, there's nothing we can do for you.
Clint, you said something that I think is so important that a lot of people, and I never thought of. I talked to a good friend of mine who's an attorney, and I said, what do you think the fallout is going to be? Is this, I said, do you think there's going to be a lot of lawsuits? And he laughed and he said, does the word asbestos ring a bell to you?
Yep.
And he said, this is going to be going on for years, if not decades. You are going to see the repercussions. Because he said, no one even really knows. There's things that people couldn't get. There's an ambulance. They couldn't get to the person, and the person passed away, and they track it back to the employer. He said there's going to be so many crisscross lawsuits. He said it will be. He said I don't even know what it's going to do to the insurance companies. And I said, do you think that they'll end up putting like a blanket in there? And he said they're already talking about doing something like that because it will be. He said if it goes to the way of asbestos and all that, he said it will be catastrophic to our economy if it goes that way with as much lawsuits that are already pending. And in California, there's a bunch of what advocacy groups already starting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're suing the cruise ships. They're even suing China. Somebody started a lawsuit against them over this. So this is why I think we're pretty successful in our space, is because attorneys are allowed to bring these types of cases. There was a couple of years ago a case in Oregon. So this individual goes up hiking in an area that was restricted. You were not supposed to be up there. It was too dangerous. He's up there and he falls. And he falls 150 feet. And of course, he's laying there and he's all busted up and he's dying. So they call the emergency responders. They can't get to him because of weather right away. So they're unwilling to fly up there because of the dangerous weather conditions. But finally, when they do get to him, they get down there, he's dead. So what does the family do? They sue the emergency responders for not risking their own lives to save the life of an individual who put himself in that position through his own actions. And they end up settling for this stupid little sum, but it doesn't matter that it was a small settlement that they end up finally paying the parents of this child. It should have never been brought. That should have been immediately dismissed like that, because what is the ripple effect of that? Forget it. We're not even going to respond to anything like it. We won't even try in the future if that's what you're going to do to me.
Yeah, and then that sets a precedent. And that's the sad part. And like you said, I mean, I think that nobody asked for this to happen, right? The residents didn't ask for this to happen. The landlords didn't ask for this to happen. The banks didn't. Nobody did. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of people that should not financially gain and just gain in general will gain. And I think a lot of people that have bad business models are going to reap the effects of not having the right structure, not having the right entity selection, the right tax planning. This is where they're going to see like I just keep saying, the stress test of the hurricane blowing on this house to see if their house was set up correctly and in order. And I think that's going to be the repercussions of it. I really do.
Well, you talked about the insurance industry. They're off the hook. You're not going to be covered for these types of claims. So they'll just sit back and they're going to send you a letter and say, you're not covered under that.
Force majeure. Or whatever they call it. That's
environmental.
It's probably a fancier pronouncement.
Yeah. Well, we've already talked to some insurers about it to see what the coverage is. And they said it's not covered. One, it's a biological virus. That's not covered under policies. Environmental reasons they can get out of there. So they said there is no coverage for this type of contamination.
Wow.
Well, very good information. I think the gist of it is, protect yourself, protect the entity, act now for opportunities in the future. Don't sit on your hands. Clint, how would people want to reach you if they want to get an advice and have you help them do this?
Well, here's what I would say. You got to get educated on it, and we're all about that. I have a book that I want to give away to everyone on asset protection for real estate investors that talks about all these various topics. And it's real simple to obtain this book. I mean, you can go to Amazon. You can pick it up for $24.95 on Amazon if you want, or because you're listening to this podcast, you can have it for free if you let me give it to you. If you just go to REAP book, like real estate asset protection, REAPbook.com, and you enter in a code on that page. When you go there, you're going to see you can get my book for free. If you enter in the code MYND, MIND04, put that code in and I'll ship it out to you. And then on the back side of that, if you want to get a strategy session set up with us, we'll definitely look at doing that, and we can talk about these issues on a more personal one-on-one basis.
Now that's how you build a business. That's how you build a business. You give something of value at no cost, let people self-select whether they need your help or not, and then they're going to become good long-term and hopefully lifelong customers. I commend you for that, Clint. I've built my businesses this way. We're building mine the same way. Very, very commendable. Appreciate
Yeah,
that.
it's funny. My grandfather told me when I started building my business this way 20 years ago, because he was an attorney for 50 years. He goes, "You're never going to find success." I said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "That's not the way you build a business." He goes, "You're giving everything away for free. They won't need you." And I said, "Actually, I want them to understand why they need me by educating them on the aspects of what they do not know." And I said, "That's how I'm going to build it." And they're an easier client to work with, and they understand what you're doing for them.
Exactly. You've groomed a good client because they know you, they like you, they trust you, and they understand how you do business. So it's a much easier plug and play as opposed to having to convince someone
Yep.
to do it your way. They come in already knowing how you do business. 100% agree. 100%.
Yeah. It's like being your own property manager. They sound great, but I tell you what, after you've done it for a while, you realize it's not what you need to be doing. That is such low value work for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's where we shine. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this was a good show. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. And yeah, Steve, thank you. Clint, thank you. Always a pleasure. We are MYND, mind.co, mind.co. The show notes will have a download link for Clint's book. You'll be well, stay healthy. Let's get through this together. And you know what? One door opens, another one closes. No, one door closes, another one's open.
Yeah.
There you go. That's better. That's better. Yeah.
You know, the opportunity is here.
That's
Thank
better.
you.
Nice.
Clint, thanks for being on. Thanks for taking the time. I definitely hope people take advantage of your book. It's reap.com. Code is MYND04. Again, if you don't take advantage of when people give you something of value, it's kind of your fault. And so this is, Clint's giving you a gift that I think that if you don't, it would be ill-advised to even go further in your investing career if you don't take advice from people like Clint and ourselves. And this is why we're here. So as Alex said, on behalf of Mind, Alex, myself, thank you for being on the show. Appreciate it, Clint.
Thank you. I appreciate it, guys.
All right. And till next time, guys, we'll see you then.